Hello. I'm alive. Barely. I have a baby. At midnight on, Sunday morning, Saturday night, I started, we had, laid down and gone to bed and, just said goodnight to each other. And I was kind of feeling some, crampy feelings, but I've been feeling crampy feelings, well, my Braxton Hicks and whatnot. And so I was like, I think I said it in Polo that, I wouldn't be surprised if I went into labor today because of, I had gone to the store and then I had done some yard work and then I was getting art for our bedroom and putting up art. Anyway, yeah, so the day before Saturday I was just I had more energy, and so I was like, I'm gonna use this ish. So I literally was on a step stool hanging art in here with Justin before bed and doing some reorganizing of things. And so then when I laid down and I started having those contractions at midnight, well, now I know they are contractions, but those crampy feelings, I was like, maybe I just overdid it, because that's happened sometimes during pregnancy where I hit my spoon quota and then suddenly my body is cramp, which is common with Braxton Hicks. I was Googling too. I was like, should I stay awake or sleep if I think I'm starting to have contractions? And every article I read was sleep. They're going to get worse and you are going to have a long road ahead of you if they're real, so sleep. So I was like, all right. Put my phone down, fell asleep for about 3 hours. Woke up at around 3 o'clock because of another contraction, because of the feeling of that cramp, starting in my back, and then it felt like it pushes forward. And at first, when I was reading about contractions, I thought they meant it wraps around to the front kind of feeling. But no, it literally feels like it starts in your back and then bulldozes forward in a weird way, or at least it did for me. And so I was I'm going to take out my contraction timer app and we'll see how we're doing, because I obviously had just woken up, so I was I don't know if they've gotten any different, but they're still happening 3 hours later, so I should probably start at least tracking them. And I did, and the contractions were coming at random intervals, not anything consistent, and pretty I don't know, short-ish, or what I assumed was short. So I would stop the phone app and the contraction would actually have been a minute long, even though it felt 20 seconds. And I was like, that's a weird time warp. Anyway, but they always say call the hospital when your contractions are 5 minutes apart, lasting 1 minute, and that pattern happens for about an hour. And it was the pattern that wasn't happening. So my contractions were all about a minute. They, at this point, were maybe 8 minutes apart, 8 to 10, sometimes 5, sometimes 2 minutes apart, no consistency there. And so I was I literally don't know if this is labor or not. So Justin's still sleeping. I woke him up and I said, hey honey, just so you know, I'm definitely having contractions. Whether or not they mean anything, don't know, but just so you know, go to bed. I'm gonna go to the couch and see what happens here. And I'll wake you up. And the app, again, I just kept not getting any consistency, but by this point it's maybe 4 or so, and they're getting more intense, in terms of strength feeling, but still lasting the same amount of time. The intervals are still the same. Still haven't gotten a full hour of them being any sort of pattern recognizably. And so I was Googling between them, and there was all these articles about like false labor being a possibility, where like basically you have the real contractions, but they don't get more regulated or more intense. And so it's like Braxton Hicks on steroids in a weird way. So I kind of assumed like that might be what this is from overdoing it today. And so I'm laying on the couch. I remember like having my head on the couch, and I remember feeling like, oh, that one's different. Like that one got way more intense. So they are growing in intensity. And then I woke up Justin and I was like, hey, I think I just need you to come sit with me, because it's been an hour since I got out of bed and I don't know what the fuck is happening, but I think I need to just have a human with me. And that's when it started getting to the point where I couldn't talk, and I just needed to like find a rhythm to breathe, which I did. And I started getting full body shakes, which is exactly what it sounds like. A contraction would start and it would feel like a shiver, like running down my neck all the way through my entire body, and then my legs started shaking. And it's like a thing. It's like a normal thing where like your body starts sending the adrenaline to like wake everything up. Things are gonna start happening. And that when the shaking started is when I told Justin, I was like, the app is not quite showing a pattern, but it is giving me a little like, you are entering active labor pop-up. Even though like it's not doing what it said. The pattern that we were looking for was from our OB and from all the birth classes and like, you know, all of the like, how do you know if you're in labor stuff, resources they give you. And so that's what I was trying to rely on. But then the app started being like, you're in active labor. And then the shakes started happening. And I was like, I just think we should call them. And thankfully we did. Justin called the hospital, told them, you know, that I'd been feeling like this since midnight. And then told them that I had shakes. And they were like, oh, you should come in. Sounds like you might be entering active labor. And I was like, uh-oh. Justin and I both kind of looked at each other and we're like, oh, okay, we'll be there soon. Wild, you know, because all of the, again, resources, prep, articles, people, birth stories, whatever that I had consumed, talk about how people labor at home for a good, 4 to 6 hours usually before they go into the hospital and the hospital greens light them. We get into the hospital. Well, first of all, that experience of trying to pack for the hospital was nuts. It was so bad. We did most of our packing in advance, but then, you know, Justin had literally just woken up and found out that we were going to the hospital and, was running around trying to grab the last minute things. Meanwhile, I am contracting way more intense to the point where I have to kneel on the floor in the bedroom and lean against the bed because my legs are shaking and giving out underneath me, and I'm doing this deep guttural breathing and can't really respond to him. And yeah, because that's the thing too, is they told us to come in, but that doesn't mean anything other than we'll give you a look-see and tell you if you're staying or going, so anyway, so we get to the hospital, we get to labor and delivery up to the second floor. They we had to enter through the emergency room because it was quote unquote after hours. They buzz us up into the back of the hospital, and so we go up to labor and delivery, which is on the second floor by ourselves. That's kind of the protocol, and go to the registration desk outside of labor and delivery, and no one is sitting there. And usually there's 3 or 4 people sitting at the registration desk up there. But there, I don't know how to explain it, the setup of the space up there, but it's there are locked double doors on one side of the hallway, locked double doors on the other side of the hallway, and in the center is the registration desk. So they obviously want to make sure that they are keeping patients and babies locked in to the unit. So that's why you have to stop at the desk to even be buzzed into the unit, because thank God they keep babies safe. But nobody was there, and I was contracting again. as this entire time as we're walking through the hospital, I have to stop and like squat because I'm contracting and breathing and I can't move and my legs are shaking. So in the elevator, I did like a squat and a contraction. And then when we got upstairs, I remember like leaning against the desk, squatting while nobody was in the registration area. And Justin goes and like knocks on the door, one of the like locked double doors, because we see somebody like mopping or whatever, and he points to like the registration desk or like to his arm, being like, "Wait, do you have like your scan in? Whatever, are you a patient here?" And I remember us being like, Justin like looking through the door and being like, trying to like point to me and being like, "She's in labor and there's no one there." And so he let us in. Well, he opened the door, got a wheelchair, put me in the wheelchair, wheeled me into the desk on the other side of the double doors. The like people at the desk on the other side of the double doors are like the nurses and the nurse team and everybody who's kind of like working with everybody in the unit. And they're like, "Oh, you sound like you're in labor." And Justin and I were like, "Yeah, maybe." Feels like it. And at this point, I remember, again, things are picking up in between. Like, I definitely am not a full 8 minutes apart between contractions. At this point, I remember it feeling like every 2 to 3 minutes or so that I was like, and I'm out. And then they get us, so the process is they get you into the triage room, which is basically like a less intense doctor's office room, where they, wanted to like put monitors on me and monitors on the baby and just see like what's going on. They asked about my OB appointment, like how dilated I was last time I knew. I was 1.5 centimeters dilated, but 0% effaced. And so remember, dilated is how open your cervix is, and effaced is how thin it is. So like how much pressure baby's head has pushed down on cervix. And that was Friday at my normal appointment. Then, when they checked me at triage, they're like, "You are 100% effaced and 4 centimeters dilated." And they were like, "Whoa, okay, you are not going home." Justin and I just looked at each other like, that was fast. 4 centimeters is nearly halfway. And of course, I'm on like the triage bed because they're like checking my cervix and whatnot, basically like a pap smear. The team, I remember being like, "Let's get you into a room and we'll grab a wheelchair for you." And they like roll in the wheelchair. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to have another contraction. My legs are shaking. And I'm like looking at the wheelchair, trying to figure out like how am I going to get my butt into that wheelchair from this bed to stand. And I think they like saw that because I went through like 2 back-to-back contractions while the wheelchair was sitting there. And they're like, "Should we just roll you over on the bed?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can't." So they had to roll the bed out of the room to get me to my room, or our room. And that's when things shifted like nuts for me. I remember that I was like laying back on the bed and that like I was looking at the hospital lights, but like my eyes rolling back into my head in terms of like just like focusing, internal focus, like not like something was terribly wrong, but like I needed every ounce of my being to breathe through this pain and to like make these low guttural noises, and my whole, like I said, whole body shaking, feeling like down to the tips of my toes, like shaking. They get me into the triage room and start hooking me up to things. So because of my like GBS positive, which is group B strep, some people have it, some people don't. So like a bacteria that lives on your body, doesn't really mean anything, but could be dangerous for baby if baby doesn't have it, and I do have it. So they had to hook me up to an IV. Totally normal, totally knew that was a thing that was going to have to happen. But then they hooked me up to the IV, they hooked me up to the like belly monitors so they can try to get a read on what my uterus is doing. And then they hooked me up to the blood pressure monitor, and then they hooked me up, I feel like there was something else they were trying to measure. But it was just like a ton of wires as I'm like in this daze and like contracting and whatever. And I remember telling them like, "I think I need to push." And they were like, "No, you're at 4 centimeters. You don't need to push." And then one of the nurses or one of the doctors, who knows, they checked me. So from the time that it took them to get to the triage room to this room, they checked me and I was at 7. centimeters dilated. So I'd gone 3 centimeters in what felt like no time at all. But I just remember all the nurses and all the people in the room being like, holy crap, this is happening really fast. And that's a thing later that I knew before, but didn't really pay much mind to, because I assumed that it was an anomaly that I wasn't going to have, a luxury that I wasn't going to have, which some people have, like, very fucking fast labors that come on. Usually it happens for your second or third child, rare that it happens for your first, and then it happened to me too. I don't know what to make of that. I haven't really looked much into, like, the behind it, or I can't remember what it's called, but there is, like, a labor comes on strong and fast thing. And so I was at 7 centimeters, and they were like, do you want an epidural? Because it's going to take a while to get the anesthesiologist here. And while I was at 7 is when, like, my contractions got super intense. Justin calls them demonic screams that started coming out of me, where, like, I couldn't keep my voice low and do my breathing anymore. It was like I have to, like, yowl. And I also, like, felt so tangled in these cords and the IVs and stuff, because they, like, nobody had paid attention to what position my body was in when they hooked me up to things, and they wanted me to, like, move to certain positions so they could get a read on baby through, like, a stethoscope, through, like, me squatting, and then they wanted me to sit back, and then they wanted me to, like, labor on my knees, and then they wanted me to, like, stand up, and, like, trying all these positions. So I'm, like, just fucking tangled in cords, screaming at this, like, 7 centimeters mark, and I was like, yes, I want an epidural, which was always something on our agenda anyway. Like, we had never decided no epidural. But I was reaching the, like, we might run out of time here point, because usually, you know, getting to 7 or 8 is fine, but, like, there was no way to tell if it was going to slow down for me, or if it was just, this was the beginning of the end. So we called the anesthesiologist, and this is, again, me telling the story based on my memory and Justin's perspective, because all I remember at this point was, like, yowling and, like, being wrapped in cords, and, like, I kept saying, I can't breathe, every time I had a contraction. And I remember, you know, Justin was like, that was the scariest part for me, where, like, you know, everyone just kept saying deep breaths, and Justin was like, but, like, you're saying you couldn't breathe. And I like, retroactively realized that, like, what I was trying to say is I can't take deep breaths without feeling like I need to push, because everyone just kept saying, like, you're not there, Corinne, you can't push, breathe, you can't push. And I remember trying to tell them, like, both cannot be true at this point. Like, I cannot take deep breaths without pushing, but it just kept coming out as I can't breathe. And I'm feeling, like, all of these tangled feelings, and feeling like I have to, like, I was in full animal mode, and I was saying to Justin, like, my hearing was going in and out, where I am fully conscious, and I have every memory of what was happening in that room. And I remember seeing Justin, like, pacing around, and there being at least, like, 10 people in this room, whether there were, like, students or nurses or doctors or whatever, and everybody had, like, a job, and they're all running around, and Justin just being like, where do I go? Like, I'm trying to get up to her, and I'm having too many people around me that he couldn't get to me. But I'm, like, screaming and thrashing, and at one point the doctor was like, you know, we don't want you to push right now, but ultimately I'm following you. If you say you need to push, we'll make it work. And for the record, like, the reason they didn't want me to push was because I wasn't fully dilated. And so if I was pushing without being fully dilated, I could have had, like, an internal cervix tear. Yikes. I didn't want that. And so obviously, like, I'm trying not to push, and that's why they're like, whatever. And then one of the nurses was like, can we check her again? And they checked me, and I was at 8 centimeters. So in the span of, like, I don't know, to me it felt like 5 minutes, but in reality it was probably 30 minutes. I'd gone another centimeter. And so 8, a reminder, we're trying to get to 10. 10 is when you can push. The anesthesiologist takes, like, 30 minutes to get there usually, and then it takes another 30 minutes for the epidural to kick in. And so I'm looking around at everyone's faces, and I'm obviously not able to talk or like do anything other than feel all these intense feelings and shaking and whatever. And I remember looking at everyone's face and like hearing them talk, and this like sensation of like, are we gonna even have time for an epidural? So the IV drip situation, they wanted me to have 2 bags of this antibiotic before we had baby come. I had one of them, and then I wasn't supposed to have the other one for like another hour or 2. And that wasn't going to happen. And so then with the epidural thing, same thing, where they were like taking their sweet ass time, and I'm like going in and out of contractions fast. At this point, they're like less than a minute apart contractions, like very in and out. And so they have to like wait every time I'm contracting because I can't answer them. And I was like whispering my answers to the questions because I couldn't use energy for anything other than these contractions. And so Justin was like echoing what I was saying. We got to the point where they're about to put the needle in me, and I remember having another contraction being like, I need to push. I need to push. I need to push. I need to push. I need to push, like over and over and over again. And then being like, you cannot push if we are about to put this epidural in you. Are we doing an epidural or not? And I remember just being like, I don't know. Somebody tell me what to do. Somebody tell me what to do. Somebody tell me what to do. And I was able, they gave me this like pillow to like hunch over and squeeze. And I remember, because you have to be extremely fucking still to get an epidural. Obviously, they're putting a needle in your goddamn back. And so I remember they gave me this pillow to like hunch over and squeeze while I was contracting. And I just remember feeling like, Corinne, you have to melt into this pillow. Become the pillow. The pillow is you. You are the pillow, the pillow. And I was able to stay still enough for them to get it in, thankfully. And then they were like, well, it'll take maybe 20 minutes. I don't know if you'll be able to get the full effects of it before this, gets further, but you'll probably won't feel nothing because it won't have time to get to that point, but you'll feel less pain. You'll still feel all the pressure. It'll just dial down the edge, like take off the edge is what they kept saying, and whatever. So the epidural team left. It was remarkable like how fast the shift happened from that, of like I could breathe again. Like it felt like I was able to find like a low breathing, like oh, every time a contraction was coming, and like my full body was still doing the shaky thing, but I no longer felt the urge to like, I have to scream, I have to move, whatever. And so I remember like clutching the edge of the hospital bed and Justin like rubbing my arm, and like that being such a surreal feeling, but like the push feeling getting more intense. The sun was starting to come up, and I remember looking out and being like, oh, it's daylight, cool. And like feeling though that like time had only been like an hour since we got to the hospital, but obviously much more time than that had passed. Because that was the thing, is like once the epidural kicked in, slowly all the people started leaving the room, and eventually it was just me, my nurse, like my like, they give you like a nurse who's your nurse for the time of your stay. So me, my nurse, and Justin were the only ones in the room, and the two of them being like, Corinne, you're doing so good. Corinne, you're doing so good. Because at that point I'd gotten my breath back, whatever. And the daylight coming in, like it was a whole different peaceful experience, I remember. And then I remember feeling like I need to push, and that's when the nurse was like, your doctor's not here. You can't push yet. I can call her and have her come in and check you again. And so she did. But I remember a couple contractions while I was there where like I don't know how to explain it other than like, it's like you have to poop and somebody's telling you you have to hold in that poop. And you're like, I literally can't. Like you don't have to poop. It's like a diarrhea constipation combination where you're like, it's like the feeling of diarrhea, but it also feels like constipation at the same time, where you're like, this has to come out of me. I have no physical control to hold this back, and I'm already on the toilet, and you're telling me I can't fucking release and like let it go. It's a weird sensation. But anyway, so like my breathing was going from like this like feeling of like every time a contraction would come on to like I could feel the pushing happening, and I was like, I can't control it, it's happening. The doctor comes in and checks me again, and she's like, yep, we got a little bit of a lip left, which just means like you're fully dilated, but like baby's head is like a little bit of cervix on it, on like one little part, so we're just waiting for that to like fully finish. But they're like, yep, you got a little bit of a lip left, so we're almost there. Still try to hold it back if you can, but like if you can't, we're gonna follow your lead. I just hate the like wishy-washy. I wish somebody would have just been like, this is what we're doing. But you know, it was great consent, great informed consent, and feeling like I was in control, but like not prepping me for what I was gonna be in control of with how fast everything was moving, you know. This is not the normal experience for labor, by the way. This is like very rare. As I was talking to the doctors after we talked about it. Anyway, so I started pushing. Like I was having those contractions and I couldn't stop myself from pushing. And it got to the point where it felt like 2 minutes had passed, and then they checked me again. But again, Justin was like, no, honey, like from when the sun came up to when they gave you the green light to push, they didn't give you the green light to push until 9:30. So obviously that was way more time than my brain comprehended. And so they checked me again around 9:30, and the doctor was like, all right, 110 centimeters, let's do this, we're having a baby. And I remember that moment of Justin and I looking at each other and being like, we're having a baby. So they got me ready to push. Justin had one of my legs, my nurse had the other leg, my doctor was between my legs, and I was like death gripping on the sides of the hospital bed. And my nurse being like, you can move your hands down to your legs if you want to like hold your legs while you push and like have something to bear down into. And I remember like with my contractions being like, I can't let go of the bed. Like I have to hold the bed. And it was like this feeling of like needing to like push my entire body into the sides of the like bed to like be able to get through a contraction. So I'm still breathing, still having that urge to push feeling, and then suddenly they're like, okay, so here's how pushing works. You're going to take a deep breath, as deep as you possibly can, and then hold it, and I'm going to count to 10, and you're going to bear down. And so I remember doing that once, and then being like, oh my God, Corinne, like we can see her little hair coming out. And I remember Justin being like, oh my God, I see her, oh my God. And he said it was like this much, that you could see like a little bit of like hair peeking out, and then it would like, you know, go away, because like you're pushing, so it's like, oh, when you're done. And so we took a breath, and I rested for a second, and like had another contraction come on where I was like, I'm pushing, and they're like, okay, well, let's take a deep breath again and do it one more time. I don't know if they said one more time. I think that's just what happened. Where like I started pushing, and then I couldn't stop pushing. And I think right before they greenlit me to push, what got them to check me that last time was that I felt my water break, which felt like a pop in the top of my, like right around my belly button. It was like, and I was like, my water broke. And they were like, well, you're not leaking or anything. And her sac was like against the top of her head. So as she's like pushing forward, there was nothing, this was still intact, is what they said. And there was nothing for them to grab onto to rupture it. So all of her waters had built up behind her. Anyway, this is relevant because the second time that they had me push, I remember this sensation of like, I can't stop pushing. And I bared down like really hard. And she shot out of me. My little Aquarius, with a gush of waters behind her, like pushing her out, like full on water slide moment. So she shot out of me, and Justin was supposed to catch her. Like the plan on our birth plan was like, when you're delivering the baby, there's somebody who catches, quote unquote, is the phrase for it, catches the baby. Which is just means like they are the hands, the first hands that touch baby as she comes in the world. And Justin was supposed to be like the person to catch her, but they didn't have time because they were like, they had him there and ready with them, but literally shot out, and I sensed from where I was as it was happening that it was like a little hot potato game where everyone was like, whoa, 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 trying to catch the baby because of how fast she came. And then Justin confirmed that that's exactly what happened. And so she came out, and my cord was short, and I have so many more things to tell you, but I think I have a little girl who needs a boob. I'm really tired. This is fucking hard. Justin and I are so like walking on broken glass feeling, and also smitten at the same time with each other, with her. Both of us, the anxiety and depression is fully flared. But that's, I think, the extent of the update I can give right now, and I'll try to give more later. But I pushed for a total of 6 minutes, 2 pushes, which is insane. In total, my labor was a little less than 10 hours long. That's not normal. We didn't have time to process any of it until after she was here, so. And now it just feels like we're on this train that, like, we didn't even get on. Like, we didn't have that moment of, like, it's happening, we're here. Until it was happening, and we had already arrived. So. I'm really, really, like, sensitive and feeling a lot. And also feeling like I have no idea what I'm doing, and that I'm failing all the time, and everyone keeps saying that it's all normal. And even the doctors, you know. And Justin's feeling the same thing of like, how is this normal? So we're clinging to each other is really the only way I can describe it at this point. And just like riding the wave of how fucking incredible this human is that we made. I gotta go. But I love you all.